Welcome back to Leadership's Not Rocket Science. I'm here with my colleagues Kerry Irwin and Matthew Burns, and I'm Leslie Mitchell. We thought we'd ask Kerry those difficult questions that I love to throw at Kerry. She goes, so we're talking about trust. So what is the value of trust in organisations, Kerry?
I think it's the basis of success of organisations. I think from a productivity perspective and how people interrelate and react, and we talk about relationships being really important versus task. I think that, organisations that are successful have trust at their very foundation. And if you talk about Patrick Lencioni, who's done a lot of work on the 5 dysfunctions of a team, of an organisation, the trust is the basis. And if you don't have trust at the bottom foundation of an organisation, you can't build forward from that. You might have their minds, but you won't have their hearts going forward in regards to their engagement with companies. And it plays out in engagement scores. You can see it when organisations, when their engagement scores come back, 90% of it relates back to trust between the leaders and the managers, and the outputs and the consistency of approach, and also the trust for people to do their jobs effectively. Like we talk about Daniel Pink, who hails from Yale University's done a lot of work in this space that talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And people will, if you don't have trust, then what doesn't engage is that ability to give people autonomy, for them to indeed work on their mastery, which is invaluable for them. That most people like that. That's their why. They want to develop their
Be the experts in their field.
Yes, and from the point of view of their purpose. So it's really important for that trust to be an underlying foundation for people to go and you get out of their way and get them to do the best they can be in what you want them to achieve.
And that sort of gives that retention to and that better productivity and that whole process. That engagement score is really interesting, isn't it? Because it is about it's much easier to keep someone that's high motivation than keep replacing people because they haven't got that autonomy, or they keep leaving the organisation.
Yeah,
it costs a lot of money.
It does. It's like 2 years of salary every time you lose someone. Equivalent to that, and people organisations don't get that. Yeah. I know we worked in an organisation where their turnover was over 30% annually, year on year, and they were okay with that.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
But trust wasn't something that they were aspiring for.
No. And that came from the top.
Yes.
That actually came from the top.
And completing that story, that ultimately affected the sustainability of the organization, and it drove its share price up from $1 to $22, and then it just crashed.
Oh, did it?
Afterwards, because the market couldn't see the sustainability in the leadership, because they were noticing of the turnover, and so they were saying you can't hold on to your leaders, so therefore there must be low trust, or must be low relationship focused in your business, and so therefore we don't think that you're a good bet to invest in.
It's all about intellectual property. If you don't, that leaves the building when people leave, when they self-select out of organisations, they take all that intellectual property with them. And you can't recreate that. They have a history. Yeah. They have the myths and legends of the organisation. They know what works and what doesn't work. And they've exited because you don't have the trust.
Yeah. So the value is to actually... So if we build that trust within the organisation, then you're actually within its people and its leaders, and it's believing in the CEO and the path and their purpose of where they're going to. That'll make a difference. You were talking about someone you were coaching the other day.
Yeah.
That I really quite like, the story around trust and
yes, and look, so I'm helping a teacher who's an assistant principal in in a school, and they have just started at the school, right? And so there you're doing year 5 and 6, and so we remember back to our preschool times. Those are probably rebellious times, and so therefore 5 and 6 is a little bit more difficult to handle because they actually know what they're doing to a certain extent, and they're voicing their opinions, and the teacher was very concerned that when she came in, to make sure that she got the curriculum right and that she was teaching the right thing. So she went very much in the first 5 weeks to task, and she was really driving all of those things. And then on the 6th week, she was called into the principal's office, and the principal said, we need to have a chat. And she's, of course, I don't know about you, but if I get called into any boss's room, my anxiety level starts to go through the roof. I already start,
racing,
things like that, and I see myself living under a bridge and all that kind of stuff like that. And it wasn't too dissimilar for her, right? So she goes in there, and the principal said, one of your students wants to leave the class, and their parents contacted me in order to facilitate that, right? So this teacher was devastated. Absolutely devastated that the parents didn't come to her. But she hadn't built trust with them. And of course, in the first 5 weeks, it's really, really hard to go and see every parent. What are you supposed to do? Teach the kids, do this, run this. You've got other teachers to run. So there's an overload, right? There's an overload of activities coming her way. And she made preferences. And when she made those preferences were task preferences rather than relationship preferences.
Or trust-related
preferences, right? And so she was devastated because the parents didn't come to her. And when she spoke to me about it, I said, well, it would be hard for the parents to come to you because they don't have a relationship with you yet. They don't have a point of trust. They don't know if they speak to you how you will respond to that, and would you punish their child or do something else, or change the relationship with the child. It could be all of these different things. And she says, well, how can I do all of this? And I said, well, you may not be able to meet all the people at once, but you can put an email out to them and saying, I'm new, I'm learning, I'm developing these new strategies, and these are the things that we're working on at the moment. I've noticed that these things are not working properly, and these need to work properly for us to do that. So I'm asking for your support in order to do A, B, and C. And this is why we're doing it. It's the why story that is so important when we want to build trust and relationships with those people. Had she done that, it would have been easier for that parent to reach out and come back to that person. And then the conversation with is, how do we support each other through this transition, rather than I'm opting out. That opting out is where we lose the value in organizations. We see so many passive employees that basically have opted out of the organizational process and the organizational belief, that are just biding time. And they're the ones who are basically not generating value anymore, but just absorbing the cost.
It's interesting too, because the other thing that you coached her around was just to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that most of the leaders that we work with that are struggling don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to show that vulnerability about where they're not successful or where they've failed, etc., or where they're struggling. And then what happens is that's an absolute essential part to building trust, is showing your vulnerability so that the people can connect with you on that. To get up and say, I don't know where we're going with this. Yeah. I need your help. Or,
yes. I made a mistake. Or,
Yes. I remember when I worked in a company and we had somebody that came from outside of HR, and they were heading up HR, and they came into the room and they'd never worked in that discipline. And the first thing they said to the team was, I have never worked in this space. I'm really nervous. It was a new GM. I'm really nervous. I need you to help me. And at that point in time, that whole team went, okay, what can we do to help him? But if he had to come in with no credentials in that space and started giving us orders and direction, then that team would not have been on board. they would have walked away from that.
Yeah.
He had that. He used that vulnerability.
And the stories would be, how does this person know how to give us orders? They've never worked in HR before.
Oh,
blah,
you're
blah,
not
blah,
an
blah,
expert.
blah.
I only listen to experts. Why you shouldn't be in that role? Was it? That's such a big thing. You know, there was a nurse manager that I was working with, and her biggest aha from a year of working with me, I was talking about building up her leadership and management capability, which she did. But the biggest aha was the fact of you don't have to be an expert at that senior role. It's not an expert in the task. It's an expert in the trust and the purpose and the strategy, so that you can actually spread that word. It's around strategy and people, not on the task, not focused in that space. And it was this, and now she's gone up 2 more slots in the because she realised what she offers is not about being an expert in this space. It's actually being an expert in people and trust and strategy and getting people to come along for the journey, building that relationship.
So how do you help leaders to become vulnerable when you're coaching them or in a program? What are the conversations you need to have with them in order to get them to start that journey?
I talk about being courageous, because for some of them, the role models that have come before them, they had never admitted that they were, they had not performed in a particular area or they'd made a mistake. And once again, we talk about experiment. So just experiment, just open yourself up slowly. You don't have to say, I don't know this and I don't know that and I failed here and I failed there. You just talk about something that you're comfortable to share and just see how that works from a vulnerability perspective and how that builds in terms of relationships.
It's really interesting you say that, because this comes back to the thing that I always talk about, and this is always a showstopper in facilitation. I always talk that we need to become intimate with each other, and everybody goes, right? And that's it. And I'd say, well, intimate means into me see. And what you're talking about is you're helping people just in the small spot, just to open up a little bit of themselves so that people can see past that facade. And once that happens, the relationship goes to a different level. And then it allows them to open up more, which I think is really, really interesting. That courageous, I think, is important. I think I don't use that word in my practice. I tend to talk about vulnerability as a skill rather than as an attribute, and as about that courageousness that sits underneath.
Because for some of them, it's really scary. Their father. I worked with a gentleman who their father, their grandfather had been CEOs of organisations. They never showed vulnerability, and I'm saying to be more successful, to engage and get more trust, you're going to have to show some vulnerability. But it's interesting too when you walk into organisations and they say our engagement scores are low, and one of the things is trust. And you say, well, let's step back. And you both know when you are asked to come and help from a cultural perspective in an organisation, it's about that consistency of approach from strategy down to organisational planning and implementation and process and et cetera, right down through that you have a consistent approach. And that you actually do what you say you're going to do, and have that. And then immediately, if you don't have the leadership team aligned, immediately one person steps out of that alignment around what you're trying to deliver within organisations or in the trust space. You have to work so hard to rebuild that back up.
It doesn't take long to knock about that. I was thinking when you were talking about that going down that line, it's that trusting. It's that trust in enabling them. So it's about. It's giving them the mastery. It's all of those, the autonomy to do the jobs that they're meant to be doing, that they're tasked with. This is yours, Matthew. You go and make it as you are. I'm here to support you, but that's and if you need coaching, training, whatever, then that journey. But if I keep jumping into your space all the time and asking you how's that going, or checking in, or giving you that information, or asking 300 questions there's a micromanager process that really knocks you about. So there's a whole organisation that I've seen whether that's occurred, where the CEO doesn't like to be vulnerable at all, has just knocked the trust down all the way down so everybody checks up on everybody's work.
Yeah.
No one has that autonomy at all.
And I think that's really, really interesting. And thank you for leading this conversation. It has really helped me to understand that courageous part of really being able to reach out and doing those things, and to really understand that sort of vulnerability doesn't come easy for a lot of people. One of the we like to share little books at the end of it that might be useful for the people watching or doing. This is called The Trusted Advisor by David Maister. And why do I recommend this book? And I recommend this book to anyone who wants to go into facilitating. Because when I read it, it turned me from an expert to an advisor. And I think we often try to be experts as facilitators, and so we are telling people what to do, and we don't build trust when we tell people what to do, right? And the trusted advisor asks great questions. And the more we can ask questions, and the more you ask questions within an organization, the more you start to build trust.
Yeah.
And you're open for different people's ideas and different contribution. And I can tell you, once you start to hear what other people want to do, and you can unlock that potential through trust, productivity just goes through the roof. Thank you for your time today, and thank you for being part of our little podcast. And we look forward to seeing you next time.